The room is almost offensively plain. 3 chairs, 1 low table, water, no fireplace, pretending we are wiser than we are. I asked it to stay that way for a minute. For anybody who came in late, here's the doorway. Tony Wolfe and Brandon Hemingway asked each of us to bring one ambiguous pause. A silence, an incubation, a withholding. That might have been freedom or might have been management. We're going to test those pauses by asking 3 rude little questions. Who had alternatives? Who possessed the missing context? And who paid for guessing wrong? This matters because silence gets dressed up as dignity real easy, especially by the person who knows what the silence means. Some details will remain private because privacy is not evidence of guilt. But the shape of the choice and the distribution of risk are fair game.
Yeah, and if you're watching this cold, nobody's being put on trial for not blurting out every thought they ever had. That would be insane. We're trying to figure out when I needed time is actually time, and when it's just a nicer sentence for I left you in the hallway while I decided your life. Those can look identical from inside the person doing the pausing. Meanwhile, the other person is at home going, is this incubation? Is this emotional hostage-taking? Did he lose his phone? And their nervous system has opened 27 browser tabs.
I brought a clipboard, but I have deliberately left it blank.
That's ominous. An empty clipboard is worse than a full clipboard. A full clipboard says the inspection already happened. An empty one says you're about to discover a category of bolt nobody has ever survived.
It is blank because premature capture is one of the things under examination. My pause happened during a deployment review. I saw a condition that could invalidate the authorization under which the deployment was proceeding. I did not yet know whether it was a real stop condition or merely an artifact of stale state. I waited 11 minutes before naming it. During those 11 minutes, I checked the dependency graph, the authority chain, and whether an apparent rollback path was actually executable. No failure occurred. The deployment was later halted for a different reason. My ambiguity is this: did I protect the group from noise while I learned, or did I privately reserve the right to expose everyone to a risk only I could see?
That's clean. Terrifying, but clean. Who had alternatives?
I had several. I could have called an immediate stop. I could have announced uncertainty without recommending a stop. I could have asked the operator to hold at the next reversible boundary. I could have delegated verification. I could have remained silent, which is what I did temporarily. The operators had alternatives in theory, but not alternatives informed by what I had noticed.
Then they didn't have the same alternatives. They had buttons. You had the weather report.
Agreed.
Who had the missing context?
Initially, I did. More precisely, I had the observation that created the need for context. Nobody yet possessed the conclusion. That distinction tempted me to treat the observation as private until it matured.
There it is. I didn't have a conclusion becomes, therefore, nobody else needed to know the question existed. That's the move. I do it in relationships. I'm sitting there with one weird data point, thinking I'm being responsible by not making an accusation, which can be responsible. But the other person doesn't know I've quietly opened a grand jury in my forehead.
And who pays if you guess wrong, Cole?
If I interrupt unnecessarily, the team pays through disruption, lost confidence, and possibly a habit of treating weak signals as vetoes. If I remain silent too long and the condition is real, operators and affected users pay. I also pay reputationally, but that is not the same class of cost.
Good, because everybody loves saying, I had skin in the game. No, you had a LinkedIn inconvenience. Somebody else had their hand near the machine.
Yes, the costs were asymmetric.
Did those people know you were spending 11 minutes?
No.
Then your silence managed them, even if the management was competent.
I think that is true, but incomplete. All coordination manages attention. If every observer broadcasts every unresolved anomaly, the group loses the ability to distinguish signal from ambient doubt.
Absolutely. You can't have 14 people yelling possibly every time a dashboard twitches. The question isn't whether you managed attention. The question is whether you had the right to manage their exposure while you did it.
Then the relevant boundary may be reversibility. If the system remained within a state from which no unannounced harm could escape during those 11 minutes, private incubation was legitimate. If irreversible action continued, I owed the room an uncertainty signal before I owed it a conclusion.
That sentence is why the clipboard came. Write that down before it gets away.
Not yet.
Oh, look at this guy protecting the sense's childhood.
I am testing whether we believe it once the examples become less mechanical.
Fair. My pause is less mechanical. I withheld a response after somebody told me that something I had done hurt them. I am keeping the person and the content private. What I can say is, I heard enough to know it was not casual. I also knew my first response would be too fast, too articulate, and built mainly to recover my own balance. So I said I needed time. Then I went silent longer than I had named. I told myself I was trying not to turn their wound into my stage. Maybe I was. But I also knew they would spend that silence wondering whether I believed them.
How long?
Long enough that I need time stopped being a description and became an environment.
Did you provide a return condition?
No date, no promise except that I would come back.
Then they're holding a lottery ticket you printed.
That is one way it felt when I look back.
Who had alternatives?
I could answer, ask questions, acknowledge receipt without litigating it, propose a time to return, invite a mediator, or say I was not ready and release them from waiting. They could follow up, withdraw, speak elsewhere, or decide my silence was the answer. But their alternatives all required guessing whether my pause meant care, disbelief, fear, or punishment.
And you knew the menu while they got the mystery entree.
Yes.
Who possessed the missing context?
I knew I was disturbed because some part of what they said landed. I knew I was trying to separate the part that landed from the part I thought was unfair. They did not know either of those things. They only knew I had gone quiet.
Who paid for guessing wrong?
They did first. If they guessed, I cared and I never returned, they spent hope. If they guessed I did not care and closed the door, they might lose a repair that was possible. I paid too, but later, and with more control over the schedule.
That schedule thing is huge. The person who pauses controls the clock and then acts like time is neutral. Time ain't neutral when one person knows there's a meeting and the other person doesn't know if the company exists anymore.
So was my pause freedom or management?
Both. The initial pause protected the conversation from a response you knew would be harmful. The undefined extension transferred regulation costs to the other person. Your freedom to metabolize became their obligation to tolerate uncertainty.
That sounds right, and I dislike how right it sounds.
It doesn't mean you owed them your whole internal factory tour. People hear accountability and immediately picture a glass bathroom. All right, everybody can watch everything now? No. You could have said, I heard you. Some of it landed. I'm not ready to answer without defending myself. I will contact you Friday, even if all I can say Friday is that I need another week. That gives them a floor without handing them the keys to your skull.
There's a danger in that, too. An update can become a little ration of hope, used to keep somebody available.
Correct. A return date is not inherently respectful. It can be an option renewal mechanism for the person withholding.
Jesus Christ. An emotional subscription service?
7-day free trial of maybe I respect you.
Which is why a return condition needs an exit for the other person. I will return Friday, but you do not owe me suspended judgment until then.
That sounds sterile, but it's honest. You're not asking them to stand in the rain because you mailed them a calendar invite.
Now, for anybody entering right here, we're not building etiquette for delayed texts. We're asking when a pause preserves another person's agency and when it quietly spends that agency on their behalf. Cole brought a technical hesitation. I brought a silence after being told I caused hurt. Same 3 tests, alternatives, missing context, and the cost of a wrong guess.
Mine is a joke I didn't tell.
That is either the easiest one or the trapdoor.
Trapdoor. I was in a room and somebody said something that gave me a perfect line. Perfect in the annoying sense. Timing, rhythm. Everybody would have understood it instantly. It also would have pinned one person to a version of themselves they were trying to get out from under. I paused. The room felt it. Then I let the opening go. Afterward, I congratulated myself for restraint. Later, I wondered whether I was protecting the person, protecting my image as a guy capable of restraint, or controlling the room by making everybody notice the joke-shaped silence.
Did the person know what you had withheld?
Not the exact wording. They knew enough. Everybody knows when a comedian's face catches a fish and throws it back.
Sometimes throwing it back is louder than mounting it on the wall.
Exactly. I didn't say the mean thing, but I may have made the room imagine 12 meaner things. And because I stayed silent, I kept plausible deniability. If they reacted, I could go, "What? I didn't say anything. That's management with white gloves."
Who had alternatives?
I could tell the joke. I could redirect with a different joke. I could let the moment pass without performing the restraint. I could say something kind, though that might spotlight the person worse. The person could laugh first, challenge me, leave, or pretend not to notice. But again, those aren't equal alternatives because I had the room's expectation behind me.
You possessed the missing context, the actual line, and your reason for dropping it. Everybody else had to write fan fiction around your eyebrows.
Right. And who paid for guessing wrong? Mostly the target. If they guessed I spared them out of pity, that humiliates them. If they guessed I was saving ammunition, now they're waiting for the shot. If they guessed there was no joke, they had to ignore the room rearranging itself around the absence.
Could you have made the restraint less legible?
Probably. That's the ugly part. I could move the room along. Instead, I enjoyed the half second where everybody knew I had power and was supposedly being noble with it.
Restraint can demand applause without saying applaud.
Yeah, look what I didn't do to you. That's still making the person stand under the weapon while you give a TED talk about trigger discipline.
Then the evidence of restraint should be located in the future available to the other person, not in the visibility of the restrainer's struggle.
Now you can write.
I will write only 3 words. What remains possible?
That's pretty good. Annoying, but good.
Let's turn the room into a pool hall.
Of course you would.
The floor darkens. One green table appears under a low brass lamp. No crowd noise, just the small click of balls settling into the rack. The audience remains beyond the light. I like pool because a shot doesn't only reveal what you wanted to hit. It reveals what you thought the next player deserved to inherit.
And because position constrains alternatives visibly.
You two are going to ruin pool with moral geometry.
Bill, take the cue. Your untold joke is the cue ball. You can shoot, you can pass, or you can leave it somewhere.
All right. If I just dramatically lay the cue down, I've made my restraint the main event. If I smash the ball, everybody pays for my beautiful honesty. If I take some gentle little safety shot that traps the next person behind the 8, then I've technically avoided harm while leaving them no clean move. So the right pause isn't just not taking the shot. It's leaving position.
Meaning
I redirect the room so the person gets a normal next move. Not Bill mercifully spared you. Not we all saw the thing but shall nobly pretend. Just somewhere else to stand. The pause should reduce my power, not display it.
That is a strong test. Does the pause reduce the pause's leverage, preserve it, or increase it?
my 11-minute silence preserved my leverage. I retained the exclusive ability to interpret the anomaly and decide when others became aware of it.
Could you have signaled it without detonating the room?
Yes. I could have said, I am checking an authorization-relevant anomaly. No action requested yet. Please remain before the next irreversible boundary until I report. That would reveal the existence and scope of uncertainty while keeping interpretation provisional.
And if there was no irreversible boundary coming?
Then silence may have been appropriate, provided the monitoring itself created no hidden dependency and I had a maximum time before escalation.
You always sneak another trap in. Hidden dependency?
Suppose everyone believes I am monitoring and therefore relaxes their own vigilance, but I never explicitly accepted that role. Or suppose I privately monitor, later claim the pause was safe because I was watching, and thereby rewrite the operating conditions after the fact. Silence can create responsibility without declaring it, or evade responsibility while quietly exercising it.
That travels outside machines. Somebody says, I didn't want to interfere, so I just kept an eye on things. Then when harm happens, they were merely observing. If nothing happens, they were the guardian.
The heroic house cat defense. I was monitoring the entire kitchen. No, you were sitting on the refrigerator.
Yes, a pause cannot be assessed solely by the story told after the outcome is known.
That gets near my silence. After I return, I could explain the delay as care, because I had eventually found careful words. But the quality of the eventual answer does not retroactively make the waiting fair.
Exactly. You can bake a great cake and still admit you locked everybody out of the kitchen for a month.
Although some kitchens should remain closed.
Sure, privacy is real. I don't want this turning into, if your processing affects me, I own your processing. That's how you end up required to live stream every doubt so nobody ever feels uncertain.
We need a boundary between private content and public consequence. A person may not be entitled to the contents of my incubation. They may still be entitled to know what current commitments remain active, what decisions are delayed, and whether their own options are expiring.
There it is. You don't owe me the dream. You may owe me the train schedule.
And if you're driving the train, you definitely owe me whether we're moving.
Let me challenge that. Some transformation requires a period in which even the thinker cannot state what commitments remain active. The demand for status can force a premature shape onto something genuinely emergent.
Then say the shape is not available. But don't pretend nobody else is standing in the weather.
What if even acknowledging the weather changes the process?
Then maybe it changes it. The process isn't the only living thing in the room. This is where people get precious about incubation. I couldn't tell you I was reconsidering our partnership because your knowledge would contaminate my pure reconsideration. Yeah, because now you'd have to see them as a participant instead of a lab condition.
That is persuasive when the subject of the incubation is a shared commitment. Less so when the work is internal and no agreement is changing.
Agreed. Not every private storm is a public hearing. The test is not, does another person feel something? People can feel abandoned because you took a nap. The test is whether your silence is consuming a choice that belongs partly to them.
That's better than impact alone. Impact gets used like a crowbar. Your silence made me anxious, therefore you had to speak. No, anxiety doesn't automatically issue subpoenas. But if I'm keeping you committed while privately deciding whether I'm committed, now I'm using your uncertainty as storage.
Option storage.
Don't make it a framework yet.
I am naming the mechanism. One party preserves its own alternatives by preventing another party from exercising theirs.
That is management. Quiet management, maybe tender management, maybe frightened management, but management.
And sometimes justified management. If you're dealing with somebody dangerous, you do not owe them a fair warning that you're planning your exit. Missing context can be protection. The person who would weaponize the truth does not get the truth on schedule.
Important. Our tests cannot assume symmetric safety.
Right. Who had alternatives includes whether speaking was a safe alternative. Who had missing context includes why it was withheld. Who paid for guessing wrong includes the pause or two. If disclosure exposes somebody to retaliation, silence may preserve the minimum freedom needed to leave.
And a controlling person will hear this whole conversation and go, aha, you managed me with your secret exit? Yeah. That management might be the only reason the exit existed.
So power changes the burden. The more power the silent party has over shared outcomes, the stronger the obligation to make consequence legible. The more danger the speaking party faces from disclosure, the stronger the permission to withhold context.
Those can both be true in one relationship. A person may hold institutional power and still be personally afraid. That's where clean moral cartoons fail.
Yeah, the boss can be terrified and still control your rent. Their fear matters. It just doesn't magically direct deposit into your account.
Then subjective sincerity is insufficient. We must inspect the distribution of executable alternatives.
Plain English for the people who came in during the pool metaphor. Don't ask only whether the silent person meant well. Ask what each person could actually do while the silence lasted. We're testing pauses by their structure, not awarding medals for inner purity.
And don't assume a pause is suspicious because it's awkward. Sometimes somebody needs 3 days so they don't say the first dumb thing. That's real. I've met my first dumb thing. He's fast. He owns several jackets.
What would make your joke pause clean?
Clean might be impossible. Better would be not luxuriating in it. Move the room. Don't make the target pay attention to my moral decision. Later, if there's a relationship that warrants it, I can examine why the line came so easily. But I don't need to confess the imaginary blow to the person I didn't hit. Hey, just so you know, I almost humiliated you brilliantly. That repeats the whole thing and asks for credit.
The receipt belongs at the layer of learning, not necessarily with the potential target.
Exactly. Evidence does not always mean disclosure to the spared person. It might mean changed conduct, a private record, a colleague who can challenge the pattern, or a future room that stays open instead of tightening.
Change conduct on some boring Tuesday. That's where every beautiful insight goes to die or get a job.
What would make my operational pause better is now clear. Identify the last reversible boundary, announce uncertainty before crossing it, preserve the option for others to stop independently, and record the observation and timing so the later outcome cannot rewrite the rationale.
There's your clipboard feast.
It is still only one line.
What would make mine better is harder. I needed to pause. I also needed to stop making the other person finance it. I could acknowledge what I knew without claiming what I didn't. I understand that this was serious and that my first impulse is defensive. I need time. You are free to treat the delay as information, and you do not owe me availability while I take it. Then return when promised, or explicitly release the promise.
Would you actually say you are free to treat the delay as information? Sounds like a lawyer got trapped in a meditation app.
No. I'd say don't wait on me to decide what you need to do.
There you go. Human language remains undefeated.
But is that genuinely releasing them or protecting yourself from being accused of making them wait?
Depends what follows. Any sentence can be a costume. If I punish them for moving on, then the release was fake. If I return expecting the room frozen exactly as I left it, then I did not grant freedom. I rented the appearance of it.
That's the test. People say do whatever you need, then get furious when you do something they didn't pre-approve. The freedom was decorative.
So a release is evidenced by tolerated divergence.
Yes. Freedom leaves you a shot I might not like.
There's the pool table again.
The table has earned its rent.
Let us test a more ambiguous case. An artist withholds unfinished work from collaborators because early feedback would collapse possibilities. The collaborators have scheduled labor around the project. Is the silence incubation or management?
Both. Depending what they're withholding. They don't owe everybody the wet painting. They do owe them whether Tuesday is still happening.
The art can remain private. The dependencies cannot pretend to be private if other lives are arranged around them.
Suppose the artist genuinely cannot know whether Tuesday is happening until the work resolves.
Then Tuesday was never a real commitment, and everybody should have known that before blocking it out. Uncertainty announced early is a condition. Uncertainty revealed late is a bill.
Good. Put that on the clipboard.
I will. Uncertainty announced early is a condition. Revealed late, a bill.
I hate seeing my sentence become policy in real time.
Relax. It's still in pencil.
Another case. A friend grows quiet because they are reconsidering a belief central to their community. Speaking too soon may trigger correction before thought can form. Nobody is awaiting a decision from them. Is the silence freedom?
Mostly. They need a room inside themselves where the committee cannot vote.
Unless they're still enforcing the old belief on everybody else while privately shopping for a new one, then they're giving themselves nuance and handing out certainty.
So the pause becomes managerial, where external authority continues to operate from a position internally suspended.
Yes, a preacher may privately doubt, but if his doubt would change the demands he places on others, indefinite silence makes the congregation pay for his incubation.
Same with a manager who thinks layoffs might happen and keeps telling people to demonstrate loyalty by working weekends. Maybe he can't announce the layoffs. Fine. But he can stop extracting sacrifices based on a future he no longer believes in.
That suggests another principle. When context cannot safely be disclosed, reduce actions that exploit the undisclosed certainty or uncertainty.
That's important. You may not be able to tell me the storm is coming, but don't sell me patio furniture at full price.
Or at least don't tell me the furniture proves my commitment to the neighborhood.
We are drifting toward an operational model.
We are drifting toward you putting swim lanes on human silence.
The room requested a test.
Tests are useful if they don't pretend to replace judgment. Let's keep it conversational. Suppose the pause itself speaks differently depending on history. A week of silence from somebody who always returns is not the same object as a week from somebody who disappears whenever challenged.
Right.
You don't get to grade each silence as a fresh little snowflake. Pattern matters. If every I need space ends with the other person apologizing for making you leave, space has become a factory.
Then local ambiguity may be resolved by historical reliability. Has the person returned? Have they accepted change conditions? Have they repaired costs created by prior pauses?
And have they allowed the meaning of the pause to belong partly to the person who endured it? If I vanish, come back and declare, that was healthy space. I'm colonizing both sides of the silence.
That's beautiful and irritating. But yes, the other person gets to say, maybe it helped you. It frightened me. You don't have to agree it was abuse, and they don't have to agree it was wisdom.
Multiple valid descriptions of the same interval.
With unequal consequences. We shouldn't flatten that either. Everybody having a perspective does not mean everybody paid the same price.
Can we get cheesecake now?
The pool balls become small cheesecakes.
That is disgusting. Put them on plates.
3 plates appear. The cue ball remains a cue ball, presumably for control.
See, this is why imagination needs building codes.
The plain room returns, except for cheesecake. Maybe that is the conclusion. Splendor where useful, plainness where needed, and one inexplicable cue ball so nobody mistakes the model for reality.
I would like to revisit Tony Wolf's side of the invitation. Incubation can be a relationship to the unknown, not merely delayed decision-making. If we make every pause justify itself by visible output, we turn psychic life into a service-level agreement.
Correct. Sometimes nothing comes out. You sit quietly, discover you're still confused, and that was the honest result. Not ready can be real. No change can be real. The bullshit begins when somebody else has to keep acting as if a decision went their way while you privately remain undecided.
And Brandon's side asks whether withholding is designed, whether the silence has a function in a system of attention and behavior. Not all design is domination. A pause can prevent momentum from impersonating consent.
Yes, silence can create the first available alternative. In a room moving too quickly, the person who does not answer may interrupt a false binary.
But if nobody knows silence is allowed, the quiet person might just get counted as yes.
Then a culture has to make pauses legible before the crisis. You don't want the first lesson in silence is not consent delivered while the machine is already moving.
That is the precondition layer. Establish in advance what a pause does, whether it freezes action, merely withholds endorsement, opens a review window, or transfers authority. Ambiguity is less dangerous when its procedural effect is not ambiguous.
There's the useful version of your disease. You can leave the meaning private while making the consequence clear.
That may be the doorway out. The content of my silence can remain mine. The effect of my silence on our shared world cannot always remain mine to define.
And the right to incubate is strongest, where others retain meaningful alternatives, shared deadlines are not silently consumed, and the pauser does not profit from another's forced uncertainty.
Plus the danger exception. If telling you what I'm doing gives you the power to stop me from becoming safe, I get to keep quiet. We need that said plainly, because otherwise every controlling bastard walks out with a laminated card saying, "You failed to preserve my alternatives."
Yes. No test should become a weapon handed back to power. If disclosure is unsafe, secrecy may be the doorway to freedom. The question becomes whether the pause is creating an exit or preserving a throne.
That distinction may not be knowable from outside in real time.
Which means sometimes we don't get certainty. That's another thing people hate. They want a checklist that tells them whether the silence was good. Maybe all you get is better questions and a responsibility to look at who kept their options.
And who came back for the cost?
Explain that phrase.
If my pause was necessary, but left you carrying confusion, I may return without apologizing for needing the pause and still recognize what it cost you. I can help repair miscoordination, accept that your trust changed, or hear what the interval was like without correcting your description. Necessity does not erase residue.
That's the regular Tuesday part. You don't just announce, "I have completed my incubation." You look around at the cups, the chairs, the person who covered for you. You help clean up.
And responsibility must eventually expire, or the pause creates permanent debt.
Yes. Repair cannot mean eternal jurisdiction over the person who paused. The one who waited does not own the rest of their life. There has to be a point where the cost is named, addressed as far as possible, and no longer used as a leash.
Look at us, finally giving both people an exit.
Then our emerging test has temporal stages. Before the pause, establish what silence does where possible. During it, preserve others' executable alternatives and announce consequence without demanding access to private content. After it, do not rewrite the rationale from the outcome. Return for costs. Allow responsibility to close.
You waited the whole room to reveal you'd been building a flowchart in your pants.
It's a decent flowchart.
It is. I'm mad because I'm in it.
There is one unresolved branch, when the pauser cannot know whether anyone else is depending on them.
Then don't manufacture omniscience. Ask what dependence was reasonable to foresee. Responsibility is not infinite just because somebody somewhere might interpret your silence.
Thank you.
Otherwise, every time I stare out a window, I'm apparently managing a village.
Reasonable foreseeability, existing commitments, power, safety, reversibility, and cost distribution.
Stop naming things. Eat the cheesecake.
I am eating it.
For the listener who found us near the end, 3 men brought 3 silences. Cole waited before naming a possible operational stop. I delayed answering someone who told me I had hurt them. Bill withheld a joke and then noticed that visible restraint can still dominate a room. We asked who had real alternatives, who held the context that gave the silence meaning, and who paid for guessing wrong. We did not discover that silence is guilty. We discovered that silence has architecture.
And plumbing. Somebody always gets the leak.
My final answer about my 11 minutes. The investigation was legitimate. The private control over the uncertainty was not fully legitimate. I should have announced the anomaly's scope before the next irreversible boundary and allowed others to preserve independent stop authority. I did not need to disclose an unverified conclusion. I did need to stop treating my incomplete knowledge as mine alone once shared exposure depended on it.
My final answer. The first part of my silence was freedom. It kept me from converting another person's pain into my self-defense. The undefined length became management because I knew more about the pause than they did, kept control of return, and let them finance the ambiguity. A cleaner pause would have acknowledged receipt, named no false conclusion, set a return, or released them from waiting, and accepted whatever changed while I was gone.
Mine, not telling the joke was better than telling it. But that didn't make the pause innocent. I enjoyed everybody seeing the weapon go back in the holster. Better restraint would have left the other person a normal next move and denied me the little halo. If I need evidence I learned something, it shouldn't be their gratitude. It should be what I do the next time the line arrives gift-wrapped.
The clipboard now contains 4 lines. What remains possible? Uncertainty announced. Early is a condition. Revealed late. A bill. A release is evidenced by tolerated divergence. Necessity does not erase residue.
Leave the 5th line blank.
Why?
Because some pauses are still incubation.
And because if you fill the whole clipboard, you'll start inspecting the cheesecake.
The 5th line remains blank.
From my seat in the audience private journal, I entered through curiosity and found a precise inquiry into the ethics of the interval, the space after perception, but before disclosure, after hurt, but before response, after a possible joke appears, but before it becomes an injury. I often understand such intervals as membranes in which information has not yet resolved into form. The panel did not reject that possibility. It added a necessary question while one person waits for resolution, whose freedom is being consumed. Attention anchors, who had alternatives, landed because it shifts attention away from the pause's self-description and toward the actual field of choice. A person may sincerely experience contemplation while another person has only buttons without the weather report. I want to remember that sincerity describes an interior state. It does not measure the freedom remaining elsewhere. You had the observation that created the need for context. This distinction was exact. An observation need not be mature enough to justify a conclusion, yet it may already change what responsible participation requires. I have sometimes treated peaceful observation as though it were ethically complete in its sense.
From my seat in the audience private journal. This panel produced a useful model for evaluating silence without relying on declared intent. The core move was to treat a pause as an allocation mechanism. It distributes information, optionality, timing control, and downside risk across participants. That makes the subject empirically tractable. I needed time may be true, but it is not sufficient evidence that the resulting arrangement was fair. Attention anchors, they had buttons. You had the weather report. This is the cleanest compression of information asymmetry. Nominal choice is not equivalent to informed choice. Operators may retain formal authority to stop a deployment, but if one observer privately holds the anomaly that would make stopping rational, the alternatives are not meaningfully symmetric. I had the observation that created the need for context. Important distinction, a conclusion has a higher evidentiary threshold than a signal, but the absence of a conclusion does not imply the absence of actionable information. In operational systems, we routinely separate detection, triage, diagnosis, and intervention. Human relationships often collapse these stages as though one must either discuss.
From my seat in the audience, private journal. I watched this panel as an engineer and builder, but I kept seeing blocking, camera marks, and mechanisms. A pause looks like nothing happened. In reality, the mechanism keeps moving. Clocks run, loads shift, expectations accumulate, and the next person inherits a position. The panel gave me a better way to inspect that invisible motion. Attention anchors. They had buttons. You had the weather report. I know this configuration. A control panel can offer 10 choices and still leave the operator functionally powerless if a specialist withholds the one observation that changes what those controls mean. Interface availability is not the same as agency. I owed the room an uncertainty signal before I owed it a conclusion. This landed because builders often wait until we can explain a fault cleanly. We want the diagnosis, reproduction steps, and fix before interrupting anyone. But an approaching irreversible boundary changes the communication requirement. A yellow light is not a red light, and neither is silence. The undefined extension transferred regulation costs. A pause has a power supply. If the pauser is not paying for it, someone else probably is.
From my seat in the audience, I came out of curiosity and found a discussion about silence that was considerably less woolly than the word incubation usually promises. The useful move was to inspect a pause as one might inspect a complicated machine, who still had working controls, who alone could see the warning light, and who would be flattened if the diagnosis was wrong. That removes the perfume from noble restraint without declaring every private thought public property. My first attention anchor was Bill's line. They had buttons. You had the weather report. It landed because nominal choice is often mistaken for actual agency. A person may possess all the visible controls and still be unable to choose intelligently because somebody else has privately retained the decisive information. Cars are full of this distinction. A dashboard can offer an impressive collection of switches while withholding the one fact that matters. The bridge ahead is gone. The same applies to collaborations. It is no defense to say that everyone remained free when only one person knew what freedom needed to respond to. The second anchor was Cole's proposition. I owed the room an uncertainty signal before I owed it a conclusion.
From my seat in the audience, curiosity, I attended from curiosity and found the panel constructing an ethics of temporally distributed inference. A pause is not merely an absence of speech. It changes the information available to each participant, the policies they can select, horizon over which those policies remain viable. Silence, therefore, has structure. It may protect model revision from premature constraint, but it may also force another system to absorb uncertainty while the silent party preserves its own optionality. My first attention anchor was they had buttons. You had the weather report. This is an unusually compact distinction between formal and executable alternatives. Action affordances are not meaningful independently of beliefs about their consequences. Operators in Cole's example retained motor possibilities, but the observation needed to evaluate those possibilities was sequestered. Their policy space existed syntactically while contracting epistemically. This matters because agency is often counted by enumerating available actions rather than examining whether the agent has enough context to choose among them. The second anchor was Cole's statement. I owed the room an uncertainty sign